Okay. You guys ready? Okay. Great. All right. We ready to go, team?
Come on, everybody.
Yeah, you should be. It's unbelievable. Sorry, I'm just joking. Role reversal. She'll tell me off later when she's got the microphone. All right, we're going to move on with the next part of the workshop, which we're jumping into fees and charges. So I'll hand that over to you, Cheryl. No, Paul, sorry.
Good morning, I'm Paula Reardon.
Sorry, Paula.
Good
No, sorry.
Yeah, I'll do that. Good morning. Just we've got the.
Oh, sorry.
So after the changes from the 16th of March, we have removed the entry fee, $1.50 per person for clubs lane hire. And we've applied the spectator fee of the $2 to Waikanapu only, and just a footnote that does not apply to Learn to Swim or adults supervising under 8-year-olds. I just wanted to add a couple more points that were missed from the last presentation. One was on the Kapiti Coast Arts Trail fees. These were reviewed, and they the budget manager has recommended we don't increase those to support local artists to participate in the supported event in the district. So you'll see in the schedule there's no change year on year proposed for those fees. And the meeting room at the Parapara Umu Library, that's just been moved into the community facilities section of the schedule with all the rest of the meeting room fees or hall hire fees. And to be consistent, that room was hired out on a half day basis, evening basis, and they've just replaced that with an hourly fee, which equates to this very similar rates as what they would normally be. So you'll see that in the schedule under community facilities. I've also just had some correspondence with Steve Miller, Aquatics Facilities Manager, regarding the commercial lane hire. So I'll just repeat those message. Sorry, I'll just grab that. Sorry, just let me. So the sports clubs, like the Masters, the Raptors, the Titans, the Pakukariki and Otaki Surf Club, they're sports clubs, so they will just be with the standard lane hire. But in terms of commercial hire, there's also Kapiti Learn to Swim that has been charged and paying that commercial rate as well as the $3.30 or the child entry rate for a long time. And he also states that it's common practice nationwide for commercial lane hire, people that are in the business of making money, to charge that. So it's that was his comment, and yeah, that's probably it. I can leave it like that. So he's apologised he couldn't be here today.
Okay, there's probably a couple of questions just that you can probably feed back to Steve, because I'm pretty sure that these councillors will have some more questions in relation to that
Yep.
they'd like some more information on. So I'll start with you, Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, look, I think you're right there, Lawrence. I'd just like to get an understanding. I don't think what was discussed this morning, and correct me if anyone else, if I've read that wrong, there wasn't a discussion around changing the fees. It was just how they were applied as such. as things. So I guess my question just at the moment is, and you may or may not be able to answer this, was just some clarity on, with regards to the pools, the Raptors, or etc. What are they being charged as individuals to enter the building? So at the moment we've got what's classified as the commercial, just for clarity, in my understanding, we've got a commercial operator who gets charged $13.50 for a lane hire and $3, whatever it is, for each person that goes in. How does that stack up against what, say, the Raptors or one of the other clubs does? They have their non-commercial lane hire fee, and then what are the individuals, kids themselves, charged?
So they only pay the $8.70 for the lane hire. So the $1.50 that Steve put up as a proposal was what he was proposed they would charge, but that was not palatable, so that was taken out as per the last workshop. So they pay nothing; they just walk in.
And can I clarify, the reason, maybe from councillors, the reason we asked for that charge not to be put in place was to help maximise kids learning how to swim. Is that correct? Would that be a fair comment?
Yep.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Councillor Coe?
Yes, look, I just wanted to follow. I understood from the people we had speaking this morning there is a disparity between how the commercial swimming operators are treated compared to other groups. Now, if that's the case, I'm not convinced that's right. It seems to me like we're double dipping with the commercial people, that they are paying to hire those lanes, and then the children should not have to pay additionally to enter the pool.
That's a co-part of what we're trying to achieve.
That's right, and I think we need to take a strong, hard look at that, because it just doesn't sit well with me. If that's the case.
Possibly,
Can
yeah.
we
I think
take this offline, or
yeah.
what?
The issue seems to be, I think this was talked about previously, that those children use the facilities. The commercial operator takes fees from those commercial users of their service, but they only reflect back what we charge them for the lane back to council. So this, I assume, is one way of reflecting the actual additional costs. We can't, I guess we either look at increasing the commercial users' fees to try and cover off that sort of residual charge, but then they'll just reflect it back to the users as well. So it's that definition of commercial, but we don't have Steve here today to talk about it. But I don't, Paula.
All he said, there is a differential. Is one group is is making money. One is like a club, not for profit. I've got volunteers, so there is a differential. I don't know how you measure that in terms of charges at this stage, but
Well, it seems to me there should just be one charge. Perhaps the commercial operator pays the one charge and the kids get in free, and then it's just a matter of what that one charge is, and then it doesn't look like we're double dipping. So it's just a question of, is that commercial rate high enough?
Yeah.
And that might be the way to deal with it. But there needs to be a reasoned argument as to why the commercial lane charges are the way they are.
I think it is purely off the back of the not-for-profit element to those other users, as opposed to the commercial operator making.
But let's
making
just
money
roll
from
it up into one fee, so that it doesn't have the. It's just how it's viewed from the outside that's important here, and just to make sure that we are. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's appropriate to have a differential lane hire rate between not-for-profit and for-profit. That's fair enough. But then, just roll it all up into one.
I would have thought you could look at what might an average increase on that commercial fee be to reflect roughly what we're recovering in terms of the $3 per child. It might go to $15 lane hire or something like that.
Yeah.
That could be one way, and then you'd remove the reference in the charging schedule that says there's an entrance fee added to the, and that would save having to add up the number of kids that are actually turning up. But I don't know how many people that might affect in terms of, you might get a whole lot of other commercial operators coming along to argue that they don't want to pay the extra charge. But so we could have a look at that, but I don't know how would we bring that back. How might we make that change now in terms of the annual plan process?
We've got to approve fees and charges at a later date in May, isn't it? So
So we could go away and look at
we
that.
could go
come
away,
back
look
with
at
a
that,
number,
come back with some information
sort of
before we approve
$16
it.
or something. Yeah, okay.
I think what I'm hearing from the table is that we want to increase equity for our, well, make sure we're maintaining equity or at least providing equity for every child. I would probably put a question mark around whether the lack of an entry fee, whether that's best for children, whether it should extend to adults, because I know some of the private, the clubs will have adults who are swimming in there, and some of the private commercial operators will have adults that are swimming. Is that a difference for us? You know, would we make it free for children but not for adults? I think those are all conversations that probably are good around there, because what I'm hearing is that we want to make it as easy as possible for our kids to get into swimming lessons. And the choices that they have available across our district, we want to ensure that they have those choices and they're equitable in that process. Would that be a fair comment around for that? And let's ask for a bit more information from staff so that we can inform that before we approve the fees and charges. Is that so, Councillor Pravanov, have you got something to add to that summary?
Yes, I have, thank you. So I suppose I'm looking at the fees and schedule charge here and sheet, and so I suppose given what Simon was saying, I am trying to understand what it means by a commercial operation versus someone or a group who's actually trying to do it for the benefit of children to learn to swim. And some clarity around that would be really good. It was mentioned earlier on that Kapiti Learn to Swim, they pay that amount. Do they actually use the facility here rather than having their own pool down the road?
There's a number of different swim school operators that operate in the Kapiti Coast that are private. The one that's on, are you talking about Ratanui Road, Kapiti Learn to Swim? I assume that's from overflow from their own personal one, can only handle certain number and ages, I think so.
Yeah, so I suppose, I don't know whether the pools actually make a profit like the libraries do, but I think in some respects, particularly to teach children to swim, I think it's important that they're given every opportunity to be able to do that. To me, it's a critical life skill.
I think the difference that we're talking about in regards to Simon and Kapiti Learn to Swim is they're completely different size or operations.
Oh, yes, I realise that.
Yeah. So Simon's running on nothing and probably making a loss, whereas Kapiti Learn to Swim is making a profit. Partially because they have their own facility and therefore control all of their overheads internally.
Yeah, so I suppose
it's quite a different. Those are two different probably animals to compare, but we do need to have a clear understanding of what do we want as a table, what is the outcome we want in terms of our community, in light of the fact that we are charging rates on our pools and access to those, as was raised today, and so it's important we've got that information. So that's what I'll.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, just a quick question. Keen for some more information to be brought back, and I'm wondering if some more information around potentially dropping the lane hire fee for clubs by a couple of dollars or something, and then so to still provide that kind of differentiation between commercial and clubs, but you're essentially making it the price it currently is for those commercial operators without paying for, so is it $13, what was the?
$13.
$13.30?
13 is going to propose to go to 13.60.
So if it stayed at $13 for commercial operators, and say, what's it currently for clubs? $8.70. Yeah, so say it potentially dropped, or I'm just trying to find a way of kind of keeping that differentiation, so we're not just saying lump it in, make it more expensive for commercial, but keeping it the same for clubs. Could we actually drop it for commercial and also then drop it for clubs, and how much of an impact would that then have? How much does it bring in currently? Would it actually be a huge thing to do, like in terms of the wider scheme of what our pools need to kind of stay afloat?
Yeah, I think it might be easier maybe just to drop the admission charge off the commercial. In terms of the amount of revenue that comes from that, I think that'd be a much lower number.
Yeah.
But that would be, we could go away and we talked about looking at whether you reflect, depending on what it actually looks like as an actual number, would be easier to do to reflect a change to the commercial rate to absorb it, or leave it the same and just remove it
Yeah. Okay.
as a fee that the kids have to pay to get in to the building, and leave everything else the same would probably
Same.
be the
The
at the
easiest
moment,
thing.
but it
yeah.
might be flagged as something you really want a detailed look at as part of the long-term plan, and look at that split in terms of the 70-30
Yeah.
public-private as well.
Yeah.
Not through you, Mr. Chair.
Who are you going through?
Sorry. Look, part of the problem I think we have here is the definitions between what is commercial and what is charitable. To me, there is true commercial and there is charitable, but there's this thing in between called social enterprise. Okay, and social enterprise is community-driven, but not profit-driven, but you cover your expenses, sort of thing. And to me, this fits the social. Simon, to me, fits the social enterprise bracket, which our delineation seems to me to be quite black and white with regards to you're either an affiliated club with a charter, more than likely, or and if you're not, you're considered commercial. I just think that needs to perhaps be brought into that conversation as well, because that's one of the things we had potentially with the Tangata Trust with regards to that being a social enterprise with a different kaupapa, if you like, with regards to commercial versus charity.
Yeah, Janet.
Yeah, I'd just like to endorse Sean's suggestion of keeping it pretty simple for now. Maybe just dropping that charge that people have a real problem with, rather than trying to tweak what we're charging different clubs, trying to guess whether they're making much of a profit or not. I can imagine some of those Learn to Swim businesses might have struggled the last few years through COVID and through, I don't know. We don't know any of that stuff. And we're getting close to the end now, and so making any wholesale changes now would be pretty, up against it in terms of talking to people and letting them know what's happening and getting a picture of, where people are sitting. So if we can just find a simple solution, keep things pretty much as they are for now, and if we really want to deep dive into this, do that through the long-term plan process, as Mr. Mallon has suggested. I would be for just leaving it as it is now and just looking at it through the long-term plan process myself. But if there's a simple solution to somewhat address what we're trying to do, then yeah, happy with that.
Great. You've already had a comment on this. Is it something pressing?
It's just in response to the mayor. I would actually like it looked at sooner than later, rather than the next year
Okay,
long-term plan.
So we've got, like I suggested in my summary earlier, we are coming back to approve fees and charges, and so we could get some more information
Yes.
that'll feed into that,
Yeah.
and then we can approve for the annual plan for next year, dropping maybe that.
Well,
that
rather than the long-term plan next year, yeah.
and the long-term plan. I think there's a broader conversation to have that probably needs a bit more time and a bit more information.
Yeah, I think what Sean was suggesting was a two-step process. So we make a tweak now to make some improvement, and then we have a more deep dive through the long-term plan process. This is workshop 3, I'll remind councillors.
Okay. I think we've smashed out swimming pool fees. How about all the thousands of others that are sitting here? I'll hand it back to you, Paula.
I've got no more comments. It's just open for questions. I haven't had anything in advance, so see how I go answering on the spot.
You got none. Great. Excellent. Keep going.
Thank you. Then I've survived.
I'll go on. Yeah, come
Too
on,
late,
get on that
Martin.
lucky.
Too late, mate.
It was just a bit of clarity, to be honest. It wasn't necessarily about charging. It was, oh, heck, I've got to track it down now. It was about the third page, and we have an inspection fee, and we charge $174 for that.
This is in the context of building consents.
Yeah, and it talked, there was a bit of a note at the bottom of the box. It talked about if it was a hard to get to place, or there could be additional travel time or that sort of scenario, that'll be charged. At what rate is that travel time charged? Is it the rate of $174? Because the reasoning for the high price for the 174 is there's a whole heap of other work that's involved in it, as such. I'm just trying to. Yeah, sorry, I don't have a page number on here. My apologies. Oh, it's just the second page in on the schedule. At the bottom of that one, it's one as noted on previous page. This fee includes inspection, on-site travel, creating inspection records, and review of documentation office. If the project is in a remote area or is difficult to access, additional travel time will be charged at the additional hours charge rate. And I'm
Which is
assuming so it's the additional hours-
$167.
Is that the $174, not like the $116 that we charge for administration as such? Because all they're doing is driving in a car. That just seemed a bit excessive, that was all. Eh? And it's climate change, yeah, okay, fair call. But that was just my view around that. And
It's about simplicity, I think, Councillor Hildenay. Maybe it's about simplicity.
Okay. And there's another one, sorry, I'm just trying to find it now. I was wondering why the amounts weren't combined. No, that's wasn't other charges, I mean. No, gone. Sorry, I didn't write it down. No, I'll have to. There was two separate fares. I was just wondering why they weren't combined as such. But I'll see if I can find that. Perhaps send it through for a question.
Great. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you. In the dog fees area, it mentions about, I've lost it now, replacement of tags. It was my understanding that the new tags that were issued, I think it was last year's, were meant to be permanent, but there are I think there's some issues with them and they need to be replaced. So I just want to clarify that what actually this means. It's got here current fee, replacement tag, first replacement $6. It's actually going $6.80. Because I thought they were going to be free. Those first ones were going to be free.
I have to come back to you on that. I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Lady, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Are we talking about fees in general?
Yes. We're still in there.
Pardon?
Yes, we're still in the fees and charges bit.
Oh,
Yes.
right. I just want to talk about the rental income on the for the housing. Can I talk about that now? So I'm presuming that people who occupy our rental accommodation qualify for an accommodation supplement from WINZ. And like I noticed that the rents we're charging are extremely low in today's market, and I'm just wondering to what extent we are missing out on revenue we could be receiving, which WINZ would cover through an accommodation supplement.
So there's a housing model I put through all the rents to make sure that they don't cover more than 30% of their take-home income, and that actually includes a supplement. So they're like at the 28-29% mark. So
Right.
yeah, at the moment.
So it's assuming they qualify for the full.
Yes, and we don't know everyone's individual circumstances, so
Right.
it's an assumption. So there is a model that I put it through just to double check there's no one over 30%.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So
Great.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Are you having a second bite at this?
No. This is actually just something else. It's more of a clarity thing. I just noticing on our schedules here that on the right-hand boxes it talks about deposit, and the well, actually it's on most of them, to be honest. But just for a good example, go down towards the bottom. I don't have a page. Sorry, I can't give you a page. It says resource management fees, say for argument's sake, just pulling one out random. Deposit covers the first 10 hours. So the current, when it says current fee, and someone pays, say, in this particular case, $1,837, both, it covers the first 10 hours. It's actually a deposit, not a fee per se, as such. Like, I guess my question is, if they say, for argument's sake, there's only 8 hours worth of done, do they get a 2-hour refund on that? Or is the fee that we charge, that's the minimum we charge, and then it's hourly rate on top of that?
I'm not sure of the answer, but I expect we charge them for whatever the hours are that were incurred, and if it's less than the deposit, they get the money back.
So
Otherwise,
because I guess it
wouldn't
comes
be a
back to the
deposit.
wording of how that's works, because I would always see a fee as being, that's what you charged. That's your fee for doing something. Whereas it's not. This is actually what you're paying is you're paying a deposit. The actual fee is the hourly rate. And it's a designation of hours that might be required for that.
It is covered in that box next to it, Councillor Halliday. It does specify, I mean, yes, the broad comment is it is a current fee at the top, but next to it, it says it's a deposit.
That's what I'm referring to. It says current fee here.
Yep, it's here.
Yep. And but it says here deposit covers the first 20 hours. It's in 167, no, 167. It's all the way through.
Yep.
Is that the correct terminology?
Yeah, so it is, I mean, in my limited experience of building consents is you do pay a deposit. And most of the time you pay more later.
True.
I don't think I've ever had a refund on one, so, but that's to get the job started and to cover the initial costs of getting it in.
Yeah, I'm just bringing it up.
I think in the table, it's just, they're using a common thing about fees and then you have to read the fine print. That be fair? Okay.
Yeah, well, it's just the standard terminology that we use for everything, and then there are exceptions that might be slightly different in terms of whether you classify it as a deposit. It's actually in the fees and charges register, if you like, in terms of the documents that we produce and are required to produce. But as you say, you could interpret that as a deposit, and then you pay the fee after you've worked out the actual time and expense. But I don't know if we'd want to add more information that might probably overcomplicate the whole process.
Okay.
I've
Great.
Sorry, just got one question kind of out of left field, but the district-wide cemetery charges, so natural burial plots, how come that's so expensive?
They are expensive.
Well, I know when we did start this process, I think there's more land area associated. There's some additional costs associated with it that are reflected back in the charges, but I couldn't tell you what those are. We'd have to come back to you with further information.
Cool, I'm intrigued, yeah.
I don't know enough. There's a tree that comes with it, I think, and there's a different way that they bury them. But again, we'd have to come back.
Okay, I can't see any more lights, so thank you, Paula. We'll move on to the next part of the workshop, which I assume is Mark coming back to us on some questions that we had earlier around a 0.2%.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, it is. I think we've got, obviously we would like to take you through the information campaign material and the process and the next steps, but I think it's more appropriate to actually get clarity on what the average rates increase needs to be. So I think back to slide number 6. So what's in question is whether or not we have a budget in the draft annual plan numbers to be able to progress the outcome work for the from Tūruhi.
Yeah, I think that was basically is there enough funding currently in the budget to allow for that work that was raised off the back of the decision around Tūruhi to cover off the further work on outcomes and what they might look like and how they would be delivered through the economic development team. And what we're proposing, where we started was we've went away, we're asked to look to bring that rates number down. This is the mechanism that we're suggesting to get it down to 7.8, sorry. But if the council wanted to reflect adding that 0.2 saving back into the budget and to use it to focus on that area in terms of outcomes, then that would be a decision that you'd need to indicate to us today. And I guess really it would be unusual for us to add that much money back into the rates number just off the back of a workshop. We don't have, I mean, unless Chris can add to that in terms of what's already linked to that work and what's funded.
Yeah, I can. And I'm catching up in the conversation, sorry, but the 150,000 that I believe we're talking about related to Te Irahi is actually about the Kapiti story, which is in the destination management plan that's part of the economic development strategy. It was being, I'll say, channeled through the Te Irahi project because that was going to be sort of a pinnacle as part of the story for Kapiti. But now that is not going forward, and that funding is essentially returning back to zero, there is no money to do the Kapiti story, which is something that you've agreed to do in the current long-term plan. Actually, Councillor Liz and I were talking to the chair of the Economic Development Kotahitanga Board and the chair of the Tourism Advisory Board, and the funding that we have now is allocated to other projects that you have supported. So things like the food and beverage strategy and the work that's coming underway for that, the education hub, tech hub, a whole range of things that I've been telling you about. There is not any spare money in the budget to allocate towards the Kapiti story. So if you don't allocate this, the Kapiti story will not proceed, essentially, until we get to the next LTP. And I think I can share, because I believe Liz is probably going to say this anyway, that the Tourism Board Chair has advised that if we aren't willing to support them to do the work they've been asked to do, then it's likely that they're going to resign. So I think hence why it's been put on the table. So that's the context to it.
Can I just add to that? If you look at our economic development strategy, the current one, the number one priority in that strategy is telling the Kapiti story. It is number one on the list. It is the major priority. I've been fighting this battle for at least 12 years that I know of to tell the Kapiti story. And that's why I'm sitting at this table, because I've been on that journey to tell the Kapiti story. That's what kicked me off on it when I first took over as the chair of the Chamber of Commerce 18 years ago. And I've followed the story, followed that journey right the way through to this point. And you know, my mission around this table is to tell the Kapiti story. That's why I'm here. And we need funding to be able to do that. So it would be over my dead body that we would scrap that funding. And yes, George and his team have said quite categorically that without money to do things, constructive things with, they will just, there's no point wasting time spending, 2 hours a month just talking. They want to do stuff, and they will resign if they don't have budget to do that. So yeah, it's as simple as that. Thank you.
Councillor Halliday.
Yep, I'm going to relitigate, since we've got the Mayor and the C in the room, and Chris as well, what I talked to before. I could agree 100% with Liz. It's great that we're doing these other things with regards to economic development, but the highest priority was telling the Kapiti story. And unfortunately, that kaupapa was bundled into the gateway conversation. And it hasn't been untangled out of that conversation. Again, I hark back to the fact that 2.25 million was allowed for in the original budget, and fundamentally only 1 million of it has been spent, to me irresponsibly, but it's been spent. This is why I didn't support the project moving forward. We brought that project back to ground zero via undoing the motions. So we should be starting that project again. I was very, very surprised to hear that that funding is now being sucked into other things. When primarily it had things it was meant to do, which it hasn't achieved through the process that was put in place by the last council. Yeah, I'm really, to me, yeah, I agree. Telling the Kapiti story, this is a very high priority, very, very high priority. And I'm very surprised to see that nothing's been allowed for to make that happen.
Councillor Warwick.
My take on it is if we take away the 0.2% and then next, when we go into the long-term plan process, we add to 0.2%, the community is going to look at us like we're a bunch of idiots, really. You know, we're taking away to save at 0.2 this year and adding it next year because we actually need it. So I would think we keep it there and do what we wanted to do.
Okay, Mayor Holborough.
Can I just get some clarity? So we had $150,000 for storytelling in the Better Off funding. This is separate to that, and it was added in so that we could achieve the outcomes of the Te Urahi project. Presumably the amount we were going to spend on the Te Urahi project as it stood has been removed from the budgets. So, yeah, I'm just a little bit confused about the budget flows.
Sorry, this conversation probably took place before you came into the room,
Sorry.
so that's all right.
So, but I did
I'll
have a
let Sean
suggestion.
talk to that.
We've landed here. I might be able to get it if everybody else has had the explanation. Maybe I can get it offline. But I did note that the terms of reference for the public art panel has changed from delivering projects to a more strategic focus. So has the budget for delivery of public art been adjusted accordingly? It could be that while the public art panel readjust themselves, work on the art strategy and align their focus, that money that's in the public art budget, I'm presuming it still is, which I think would be maybe around about that, could be reallocated to telling, or some of it could be reallocated to telling the Kapiti story. I don't know. Well, they're a new panel.
So
I don't think it would be an issue. I mean, they could then apply back if there was a public art piece. It would just broaden the scope of that fund. I mean, it's just a way of finding the money so that we don't get back up to 8, which is what we were trying not to do. I'm aware that Councillor Wilson isn't here, but yeah, it was a suggestion. So 2 things there. Yeah.
So there is $150,000 of capital funding still remaining for the storytelling and artwork, physical works proposed for McLean Park. So that's the Better Off capital funding. That's the $150,000 that's there. That's locked in. There's work associated with that. The telling the Kapiti story, the elements of that were incorporated into the visitor experience centre. The 2 buildings, we had the biosecurity, we had the other building. There were elements of that storytelling, telling the Kapiti story, that were embedded in that project and funded through that project.
Yeah.
That money, the capital funding for all of that, when we stopped the project, I think I talked about it at the briefing about there were some other things that we had to keep going, but there was certainly a desire to stop everything. All of that capital money was taken out of the budget. It's not in the current $88 million. So that doesn't exist anymore. The conversation, I guess, that we're having at the moment, Chris, is that $150,000 that is the 0.2 was the funding associated with interest, operating costs, rates associated with actually building Te Urahi and having it completed. Just so happens that the numbers all line up, which I'm sure that's helpful. But so that was where the 0.2 came from in terms of us proposing we can reduce the rates, take the 2.2. We're not building the 2 buildings. That is a saving in terms of next year's rates number. the next conversation that Chris just mentioned is this conversation about trying to supplement what was being provided by Te Urahi through the capital project by allocating that $150,000 back into the economic development area to be given to for them to take that and start to develop something around telling the Kapiti story as an operational expense. So taking the money, I think, from the arts budget would be capital cost that they have for delivering and building things. I don't know if they're quite the same in terms of serving the same outcome, if that sort of helps. So that's where we got to. Do the council want to put that money back in, deliver it through the economic development team and use it to fund that work around telling the Kapiti story, or use it to offset the rates, or split the difference and put half of it in and keep it at 7.9. But
I'm
that
all
was
for
where
that.
it was at. And I know Darren might want to.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's not actually budgeted for what the intent of what you're asking us to do. So I think we need to make that clear. It was for a different purpose. So you're asking us to reallocate it, which is what we really need to decide. Te Urahi was a decision of council. I just really need to make that clear. It wasn't staff. I'm not tethered to it because it predates me. But where we find ourselves now is in a different time and looking at how we, I guess, continue to tell that story, which is really, really important. And I note your comments, Liz, about what is the priority for that strategy. I think if we leave a 0.1 in there, which keeps you at 7.9, which is under that magic 8 and aligned to year 3, there might be something that we can do in the background. I'm not going to make any commitments, but 75k is easier to find than 150, which in the scheme of what we spend annually is not much money. You know, so I quite like Sean's suggestion of skimming 0.1, which keeps you at 7.9, and then let's see what we can work through to find an extra 75k to sit you at 150, or you go out with 8%. That's really what we need this steer for today, so that we can land and strike the rate.
Councillor Coe.
I wouldn't be happy with that. Look, by all means try and get it to 7.9 or whatever, but don't take it from telling the Kapiti story. Get it from somewhere else. I'm absolutely staunch on that. It is number one in our economic development strategy. We have to fund that, and cancelling Te Urahi is going to leave a big hole in terms of delivering on outcomes. And yeah, I mean, Te Urahi was cancelled for a whole pile of reasons. It didn't change the fact that those outcomes were still really, really important, and that's why that was added into the motion, that we still absolutely have to achieve those outcomes, so we've got to find the money from somewhere. So 75k just doesn't cut the mustard, in my view. That's nothing. We've got to have a reasonable budget, and if we have to trim back 10,000 here, 10,000 there, 10,000 somewhere else to make it up, then that's what we've got to do.
Councillor Coford. Sorry.
Thanks, Lawrence. Could we possibly research a partnership with local developers or business groups to assist us with telling the Kapiti story? I'm sure they'd be delighted to, put
I
in
think
some
that's
money.
part of the economic development plan.
Right.
In there is that work.
So
what-
that has been researched, has it? Sorry.
Yeah, look, one of the reasons for having an independent economic development board was so we could leverage other funding outside council. And that is very much part of the plan for the EDKB and the Tourism Advisory Board. They are actively looking at other sources of funding to supplement what they do. So even like 150k isn't going to be enough long term. They're looking to have ideally up to $1 million that they can use to develop our tourist industry. That's not all going to come from council. It has to come from, partly from outside council to get to that level. So yeah, leverage is the word. We've got to get external funding.
Great, thank you. I think there's that's a whole bunch of conversation around a strategy. What we need to land on today is a steer for staff as to what is the rates increase that we're happy with. I have heard from our CEO, Darren. I think he was pretty clear that if we went for the 7.9 and took 75k in to start with, that they as staff would look to assembling or trying to get another 75k from elsewhere to increase it back to 150 in the budget for telling the Kapiti story. I personally am keen for us to try and land under the 8%. I think it's easier to sell at 7.9 than it is at 8 in terms of that. Now, I had Chris waving at me from the other side. Did you want to say something?
I did. I just wanted to assure you that we are actively working with others, including Wellington, New Zealand, just in terms of storytelling and other things to try and source additional funds. So we haven't come with purse strings here first and only here. And so I just wanted to let everyone know that. So 150,000 is the bare minimum. There's more needed to do this work. And so there's a huge amount of things going on. You're actually going to get an update on that, just to assure you that it isn't just here.
Okay, Councillor Coe.
So can we just change that line? Just cost savings from somewhere, minus 0.2, rather than talking about Te Urahi, please. Cost savings to be determined, whatever.
Okay.
What about from the Te Urahi physical construction project? Because that way we're still committing to the outcomes of the Te Urahi project as we've identified, but as Darren made quite clear, this is about not doing the Te Urahi building. This is the savings that were achieved through that. It's not removal of any economic development budget. It's just removal of that project as a capital expenditure. Yeah, well, it's the OPEX associated with the CAPEX in terms of the interest and the
rates.
So it's the OPEX
staffing,
associated with the CAPEX
the power.
project, but it's not saying. I don't think people would mind because we've clearly removed the Te Urahi project, so it's removal of the expenses associated with that. It doesn't mean that we've removed everything that we're going to do. It just itemises that part of it, really. Yeah.
But there's no budget allocation for telling the Kapiti story. That's the issue. So we need to repurpose that money that was going to be used for Te Urahi OPEX to telling the Kapiti story OPEX, e.g. that is, TAB and EDKB. So we need to make sure that funding is there. So I just, I think we just need to be really clear on that and just say we will find cost savings somewhere, but not take it out of Te Urahi. Or, we need to provide, we've taken away Te Urahi, but we've put other outcomes, the outcomes are still there with no budget attached to them. That's the issue.
Darren.
Thank you. Good points. I admire the veracity of the debate. So we'll change the narrative. We'll find point 2 to keep us at 7.8, but it's really from a transparency perspective, it's really important for us to show that we are taking that out of the budget, because that was operating money for Te Urahi. So we will find 150k that will provide your need for EDKB, and that will hold us at 7.8.
Okay. The CE has spoken. Are we happy with that around the table? Because we've got to give a steer on that 7.8. Okay. All right, so we can hold. So I'm taking the steer from the table that we're wanting to hold with 7.8% on the assurance of Darren, and to somewhere position in the annual plan $150,000 for telling the Kapiti story through the Tourism Advisory Board and EDKB. Is that a fair steer from the table for staff? Are we happy with that? Fantastic. Can move on to the communications plan.
I have a question.
Councillor Bravanov.
Thank you. Good conversation. I just want to follow up with the CE about being open and transparent, which is great. But I would also like to see when this comes back to us, a line in there saying that that money has been put aside to that, wherever it might come from. Yeah. Well, no, it has to, you know, because if it's not written in there,
I think it'll be listed in the budget for the annual plan when we approve it at annual plan process in June.
yeah, well, I just wanted to reiterate.
You just want to
that
make
it's
sure that that's
important
clear,
is
that
there.
it's
Yes,
itemised in that
Yeah.
budget.
yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Paula. And back to you, Mark. Thanks, Sean. So we're on page 14, information campaign.
So thank you everyone. I would like to invite Cheryl to take you through the next few slides on the information campaign, and then we'll pass the last slide to me to just take you through the next steps. I know we almost have run out of time, so we'll take you through this really quickly.
We'll do it super fast. Hi everyone, my name is Cheryl and I come from Northland, and I'm here for 12 months to help lead through this annual plan, the next annual report and the next LTP. So we're going to become really good friends, I think.
Welcome.
So listen, I'm not a comms expert, but I have been in and around the comms of annual and long-term plans for many, many years in quite a few different councils. And what we're planning for this year is a very straightforward comms program to inform people about what the shift is from what we planned in year 3 of the LTP to what we actually think it's going to be. So we are, as Mark mentioned earlier, we've got a campaign, a 1 month long campaign from the 26th of April to the 26th of May. And we'll be using key channels like newspapers, social media, our own website. Again, Mark alluded to the rating database, which will be really important so people can go and see what the impact on their rates is going to be. So messaging, oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong slide here. We've got some proposed key messages, and they are those conversations that we've been having for the last 3 workshops. So we're sticking to our plan, the original plan for year 3 of the LTP, but of course our operating environment has been battered and bruised by external influences like inflation, significant cost increases, interest rates, depreciation, etc., etc. So we've had to make some allowance to try and absorb those costs and bring us to a rating position that is similar to what we originally forecast. So the key messaging intends to go along the lines of this is what we've done to try and get us down to that level. And it's mostly from reallocating better off funding, but a few other little tweaks around the edges. And making sure that the community understands that while we have cost pressures, we know households do too, and we take that really seriously, and we are, trying our level best to keep the rates impact down. Any questions on those key messages? Is there anything that you're not hearing or seeing there that you think would be? What you want to say?
I've just got one question. That comment around mainly from reallocating the Three Waters better off funding. I think there would be the potential perception from some that we've reallocated it to different projects.
Oh, absolutely.
I think maybe just clarifying what that actually means. So we haven't gone and changed what it's going to be contributing to, but just how it's balanced.
Yes, we'll find a very eloquent way of describing that shift, because it is really that we've refunded or changed the way we fund something that we already do, and that it's going to be business as usual. It's just taken from one pot and putting it into another. Mark?
Yeah, just also just to give a bit of context. Obviously, you've done more than that, but that was the big one. That was 3.2 million. You've also decided to, not on charge the uplift in depreciation. Growth is a bit stronger, so we'll obviously touch on all those points. So. We want to convey that you've all done it tough and you've worked really hard and you've had to make some hard decisions. So it will be conveyed. It's just in dollar terms that's the biggest one, but it'll spell out it's going to fund the maintenance of Three Waters, as they won't be continuing. So it's a prudent decision. So it'll be framed up to reflect reality, but it'll be framed up well.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And campaign examples, those of you who were around this table last year will recall the campaign that was done. I know that one looks like one picture, but it's actually three. If you can picture it as a three-staged approach, where the first stage was this is reminding you of what an annual plan is, what we do and how we do it. The second one is funding our services through rates, which is our main source of income. And the third is, this is what the impact on your rates bill will be. So it'll be similar. Of course, the little portrait in the middle there will be different. And here's just a couple of examples. Like we did a lot of Facebook and general social media work in the last campaign. We'll continue that. The Everything Cup of Tea newsletter, which I understand has got a fairly good circulation. We are developing all of that collateral at the moment, so we will be ready to go on the 26th of April. And after today, we're going to finalise the comms plan, all of the details.
I just wanted to add very quickly that we really are applying the same methodology that we used for the current annual plan. It worked really, really well. Part of what we heard loud and clear was, tell the community why and how. So, I guess the three iterations, what we experienced is it was very effective. It wasn't an overload of information, and it was quite the sequential rollout of the information worked really well. So we're sticking to that formula. So we did do it last year, and we're largely sticking to it. But obviously the messaging in workshop 2, you made it very clear the key messages that you wanted to emphasise. So the sequential is happening, but with some stronger messaging about what you've done to reduce our rates.
Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, thank you. If you just ask to keep it on the side of the table too, it'd be appreciated. Only point I had, knocking it back a slide or two, with regards to that one there, proposed key messages. I think it's important to reiterate that the 12.4% was actually what was initially, not necessarily proposed, but that's what it was going to cost ratepayers just for standing still. I think it's quite important to clarify that point, that without us doing anything, just sticking to the long-term plan under the current, because everyone's going to start saying, well, hang on, we've had all these price increases, why isn't it increasing? And we can actually say to them, well, actually it did increase. It went up to 12.4% under the current plan. We've had to look at ways of bringing it back down to what it was initially. I think it's quite an important point of definition as such. The Three Waters has been part of that process as well, but I do take on board that we need to be a little bit wary that the other groups, as Sophie said, don't think that funding's gone away. It's just how we're applying it is a bit different as such.
Cam.
Thank you, Martin, because that was one of the things I was going to say, is that we need to make, I just want to reiterate that definitely need to make sure that people know that it actually was going to be a hell of a lot higher. And in fact, I think one of our slides that showed it now December was at 14%. Makes it sound even more impressive if we put 14% in there. And I believe I also saw a media release or something sort of saying we've tightened our belts, and if that's a theme that we're going with, maybe we should continue that. We've tightened our belts and we've reviewed our revenues just to, keep that consistency there. And I don't know whether, given that some of the other councils are coming out with larger rate increases, whether we can emphasise the fact that, hey, we are below these other councils and the like.
Apart from Upper Hutt.
Yeah, but they don't spend enough money. But no, that was just minor things. Thank you.
Mayor Holborough.
You did mention that picture of one person in a circle in the middle. I'd like to suggest we took a really great photo of the councillors and all the staff in the foyer at the beginning of the triennium, and this is really a big effort across the whole organisation to achieve, as lower rates increase as we can, and to prioritise spending, and it reflects the work we're doing across all the organisation. So I don't know if it'd be appropriate maybe to use that photo, and maybe a photo of Mark. Sorry. Yeah, and you use the word tweaks. I don't, maybe, of course, wouldn't use that word, would we? No. Or glossy brochures.
Okay. Any further questions around the comms plan information campaign? Sorry. No? Okay, we'll move on to next steps, Mark.
And finally, the last slide. So, which you pretty much already know. So obviously we'll go into production now on the information campaign material. That'll kick off the 26th of April to the 26th of May. So a lot of work will be done behind the scenes now, just finalising numbers, doing what we agreed to do today, finalising Greater Wellington Regional Council's rates numbers, getting the rates tool calculator operational. But 26th of April to 26th of May is effectively we're informing the community. What we also do is, in advance of that, we do send all of you the material plus FAQs as well, so that you are well armed to engage with members of the community as well, because inevitably people will come up to you and ask you questions. So you'll have a full suite of FAQs. So there's so we effectively from today we go into production mode basically. Then on the 25th of May, we will table a report to council for adoption of the fees and charges, and that will probably detail a couple of things that we discussed today, but effectively you adopt the fees and charges for 23-24, which enables us to then implement the new dog registration fees. And then fast forward to the 29th of June, we'll sit down with the council and we'll ask you to, number one, adopt the annual plan. So it'll be a covering report. We'll actually have the annual plan document in front of you. And by legislation, once you've adopted the annual plan, you set the rates. So then the second thing we'll be asking you to do is actually set the rates for the following year. And I'm sure there will be other agenda items on that council meeting anyway. But this will all be wrapped up and finalised on the 29th of June.
All right. There's no lights, so thank you, Mark. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, team, for that workshop today. Appreciate that, and thank you to all of the elected members and any that are online for attending and your good questions today. We'll call that one finished. We've got a lunch break now. The next, there is a closed briefing at 2 p.m. And then just for your information, tonight's affordable housing submission hearing, that starts at 5:30 p.m. in here. There is dinner available because we have a induction session on our legal obligations to Māori. That won't finish until about 4:30. So there's only an hour between that and the next. So there will be dinner provided at about 10 to 5. There'll be some food coming in, pizza and something. So if you don't like pizza, you might need to go and get something else. But just so that's there, so you don't feel like you have to rush off and then rush back. Okay. Great. Thanks, team. Appreciate it. Let's have a good lunch break and get some fresh air if you can.
So, Lawrence, could I ask, in terms of the public submissions this evening,
Yes.
are we able to have a list or know how many people are coming along?
My understanding is there are 6 people speaking at this stage.